Today we're going to talk about minimum shutter speed. Just a quick note, if you have not watched my video on true focal length, like how to figure out your lens's true focal length, you have to watch that video first. Otherwise, what I'm going to tell you in this video is not going to make sense to you, because you have to first figure out your true focal length in order to understand what the minimum shutter speed is going to be. So I'll just give you a quick example. 50 millimeter lens. This is not really 50 millimeter lens on a crop sensor body. It's actually 75 millimeter on a Nikon, so, and 80 millimeter on Canon. So your minimum shutter speed for this lens, 50 millimeter on Nikon, it would be 1/75th of a second, and on Canon it's going to be 1/80th of a second. So watch that video so you know how to figure out your true focal length first, and once you know your true focal length, then it's very easy to figure out your minimum shutter speed. Right, so why is minimum shutter speed so important? The reason why it's important, because if you fall below your minimum shutter speed, there's a very good chance that your picture may not come out very sharp. Okay, it may look, in some cases it's just blurry and people don't realize it. Okay, and I have the same issue. When I first started it, I thought my picture looked okay, but that was not the case. And you know, when you zoom in, you'll see a lot of imperfection in your image, especially if you fall below your minimum shutter speed. Anyway, in order for you to get really sharp image, you wanna stay at your minimum shutter speed, or if you're getting faster shutter speed than your minimum shutter speed, that's fine too. Don't get confused. I'm talking about minimum shutter speed. I'm not talking about that's the shutter speed that you have to go with. So let me give you some examples. I just told you about 50 millimeter lens. Here's an 85 1.8. So 85 1.8, first you have to find out your true focal length. On a Nikon crop sensor, the true focal length of this lens is going to be 127.5, okay? There is no such thing as 127.5 shutter speed. So I would personally, I would do 1/25th of a second, because there's only 2.5 difference, and you can get away with it. If you don't feel comfortable, just round it up. Okay, so let's see, I'm trying to figure out 55 millimeter. A lot of people use kit lens, and that's like 18 to 55. So let's say you're zoomed in all the way, and 55 millimeter on Canon. Wait, 55 millimeter on Nikon will give you 82.5. Again, there's no such shutter speed as 82.5. Like, there's no 1/82.5 of a second. So what you want to do is just round it up, and that would be 1/100th of a second. So, and same thing with Canon. All you have to do is just get your focal length, multiply that by 1.6. That will give you your true focal length, and you're basically using its reciprocal. Okay, and if it's a number that you can't pick on your shutter speed, just round it up. On this, you could get away with it with 1/25th of a second, in my opinion. But if you feel that you don't hold the camera very firmly and you don't press the trigger very gently, round it up. Go with 1/50th of a second. So the question is, can you break this rule? And the answer is yes, you can break this rule. In photography, there's no such thing as absolute. So have I broken this rule? Yes, I have. Success ratio is not very high. And I'm not going to lie to you, I have taken this, using this lens, 50 millimeter on a crop sensor, which means that my minimum shutter speed should have been 1/75th of a second, and I have actually pulled off a shot at 1/40th of a second. I'm not going to lie to you, how many times can I pull that off? Not very often. Out of 10 shots, maybe one. And if I'm shooting an event and I'm trying to do this, that's just committing suicide. So don't try to pull anything like this in certain situation. I mean, I pulled it off because I was just testing myself, like how low I can go. I could probably pull it off at 1/60th of a second, which is off by only 1/15th, because I would need 1/75th, and if I do it at 1/60, I know I can pull it off. But you don't want to take a chance. You don't want to take a chance, especially if you have a flash on top of it, and if you've been shooting for a while, your hand gets tired. So try to stay at your minimum shutter speed or above if there is room. Like sometimes if I'm shooting at night and there is sometimes room to increase my shutter speed. For example, like 1/75th is required, but if I know that I've been shooting for a while, like if it's a wedding or some sort of an event, and I know, like I feel it in my wrist, I would increase that to 1/25th of a second. So don't even take a chance at minimum. Again, it's minimum, not maximum. For example, if you are shooting outdoors and you're getting shutter speed of 1/2000 of a second, 1/4000 of a second, that does not mean you have to drop your speed down to 1/75th of a second using this lens. That just means that you're way above your minimum shutter speed, so you're fine. This applies when there's not a lot of light, and what people do is, especially in aperture mode, because the camera doesn't know these things. All the camera is doing is picking up the shutter speed for you based on the aperture that you picked. So in aperture mode, your speed could be 1/30th of a second, 1/40th of a second, and in reality, what you need is 1/75th of a second or 1/100th of a second or above. So in that case, what do? Well, you try to balance it and maybe bump up your ISO so you can get to your minimum shutter speed at least, or open up your aperture. Now if you're using a kit lens, there's so much you can do, so you may not be able to open up your aperture, and in that situation you want to bump up your ISO so you can at least reach your minimum shutter speed. Trade-off is the noise. You can try to fix the noise in post-processing. I mean, your choices are limited, but you're going to get at least sharper image. Okay.
Alright, so here's the first image I took of my cousin Danny. If you guys are watching this video on full screen, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it clearly, so you might want to reduce the size of your the window. Alright, so if you look at this image, it may look like it's okay, but in reality it's actually not sharp at all. It's blurry, and I'll show you a crop version of this picture and just look at the eyes. And how do you know if the picture is sharp or not? You look at the eyes. And here you can look at the eyes, and clearly it's blurry. It's not sharp at all. And that's how you know if you nailed a shot or not. Alright, so this was shot at 1/30th of a second, and I was below the minimum shutter speed. Due to camera shake, this will happen to you whenever you fall below your minimum shutter speed. Well, the chances increases dramatically. Alright, next picture, I increased the shutter speed. This was shot at 1/100th of a second, and clearly you could see there's a huge difference in sharpness in the eyes. Just the focus was on the left eye, and you can see it's much sharper than the previous image. I'm trying to see. Actually, never mind. Alright, so here's a crop version of the same picture, and you could see the eyes are much sharper. Here's another example. Look at the eyes. This was 2/50th of a second, well above my minimum shutter speed, and it's very sharp. So whenever you're doing portraits, your square focal point has to be on the eye, and that's how you should always take the picture. Now, this is at 2/50 of a second. Don't think that the faster the speed, the sharper the image becomes. No, it's not like that. The same picture at 1/25th of a second would have been just as sharp if there were no camera shake. As long as you freeze the action and there's no camera shake, there's no dramatic camera shake, you're going to get a sharp image. And remember, the square focal point has to be on the eye when you're doing portraits. Alright, here's another group photo. Again, this is cropped. I don't frame my portraits like this, obviously. Look at the eyes. They're sharp, simply because I focused on the eye and I was within my minimum shutter speed. So try to follow this rule, it's very important. You could break it once in a while and maybe able to get away with it, but for the most part, especially if you're just starting out, I would highly recommend that you stick with this. If you guys want me to post these pictures on the Facebook page, let me know. And that's pretty much it for today.